welcome to the show. My name is Jen.
I'm Daniel.
And
Because we want to meet you right where you are. All at one time, like, wait a minute.
we are going to do segments every week with special guests every week. Our new show that we are super excited about. And we're going to have some fun today. Look, y'all just get to listen to the stay-at-home mom life.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Breakdown. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Jen.
And we have two special guests with us, and they are...
I'm Troy Marshall.
I'm Kennedy Clayton.
Hey guys, and we have a wonderful show for you guys today because our social media moment is Jesus is the great healer. But before we go into our conversation piece, I need for you to do me a favor. Take the opportunity to like, subscribe, and comment in the comment area below, because we may be doing this talk show here, but you're a part of this talk show too. So let's engage. And matter of fact, if somebody say something funny, there's a ha-ha. Put a ha-ha up. Or somebody say something you love, put a heart up. Or they say something you like, just put a thumbs up and comment things in the comment area so you can be engaged, because I'm quite sure that Jesus has been a healer to you. Matter of fact, Jen, can you tell how that that Jesus has been a healer to maybe some friends or family members that you can think
Yeah.
of?
I mean, there's several. You know, my aunt was diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago, and at that point, most people were probably planning her funeral, and she's still kicking it today.
Wow.
And you know, in the hospital room, she said everybody was crying and freaking out because they thought she had pneumonia, and it turned into stage 4, I think, cancer. And she said, you get out of my room unless you're going to be positive, because my God's bigger than cancer.
Yes.
And I mean, her attitude has been that 100% for the last 4 years. So I think that's, you know, just a testament of her faith in God and his healing powers as well.
We've seen God do some miracles in friends and family member life. As a matter of fact, can you testify to the fact of a family member or a friend that has gained healing through Jesus Christ?
Honestly, I don't know. Hold up. Let me think. I'm sorry.
While she's thinking, Troy, what about you?
Yeah, I've seen miracles my whole life. When I was 5 years old, my mom dragged me to this woman's prayer meeting, and we were playing around, and then they'd make us, when it's time to pray, they'd make us come over there and pray with them, you know, teaching the kids how to pray. And this woman had braces on her legs. Mm-hmm. And the reason she had braces is because her kneecaps were on the side of her knees. They were twisted. And they were just praying, and they prayed over, and then everybody went to just praying about different things, and all of a sudden you hear this rustling noise, and I open my eyes up, and the woman's taking her braces off. And right in the middle of that circle, she stood up, and her knees were straight in front of her legs, and she started walking, and she never used those braces again.
Wow.
Never.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I'm quite sure we all have stories to tell that we've seen Jesus heal our family member. But you know what? There's one thing about seeing other people heal, but when you can look in the mirror and say, Jesus healed us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. You know, and I'm quite sure that Jesus has healed you, Troy, in some form or fashion.
He has. And about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a cyst in my brain, and they said it was about the size of an extra large egg. The way I found out, I was rushed to the hospital. My whole right side went numb. I had localized seizures in my right side. It would start in my foot and just roll all the way up to my lower chest, and then settle in my core right here, and then go back down, just back and forth. It would go about 5 minutes, and then give me a 15-minute break, and then go again, usually about 5 cycles. I thought I was having a stroke. I couldn't walk. I could barely talk. And they rushed me to the hospital and did a CT scan and found out that I had a cyst. Pretty well shocked me, scared me.
And you were healthy before this, right?
I was. I worked every day. I've done home renovations all my life. I worked that day. I was coming home and I did work on the grill. So I was cooking food, we ate dinner, and then I sat down and just went into that immediately.
And so, so after that, after you experienced that and went to the hospital, what happened from then on?
They transferred me to UNC because they didn't know if I had, if you know, the CT scan showed a cyst, but they didn't know if there was any bleeding or swelling or anything. So they were concerned. So I took a trip to UNC hospital to, you know, kind of do MRI and figure out exactly what was going on.
Wow. So how long? So being that you have a cyst, and you know, that's something on your brain. That's real. That's
serious.
a serious thing.
Yeah, it was serious.
How long did you deal with this?
Ultimately, over 5 years. I had those seizures approximately every 3 to 4 months, but it was tolerable. When I was at the emergency room, a neurosurgeon came in and he said, you know, the symptoms you're having have absolutely nothing to do with a cyst. They said they found the cyst, but they weren't related. And that kind of bummed me out because it was like basically they said they weren't going to do anything. So as long as it was tolerable, I would just keep praying and asking God to heal me. And then 3 months later, I'd have another one, and I'd say, you know, go back into that same cycle of having faith and being strong. And then once that would happen, I'd feel hopeless.
5 years. 5 years, and I'm quite sure the first time it happened, you thought the Lord was going to heal you instantly.
Yeah,
you know, because when you ask for healing, you expect God to do it right.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be one and done. God, you know, I had seen God heal. My son was healed from an umbilical hernia. He was diagnosed with it when he was very, very young, and they said they'd wait till he was 2 or 3 to do surgery. And so when I took him to a doctor at about 3 years old, I said, will you check his umbilical hernia? And my son had asked me to pray a couple weeks earlier. So we laid in a bed before he went to sleep, and we prayed for him. And doctor said, he doesn't have an umbilical hernia. And I said, well, do they grow out of them? And he said, no, you either fix it or it's there.
Wow.
And
So
he didn't have it.
So being that you're going 5 years here, when did the ultimate healing take place? Tell us about the time when you were able to go back to normal. What got you back to normal after dealing with this thing for 5 years?
Well, May last year, I had another seizure. It was particularly bad. And then from May all the way till December, I started having them exactly every 30 to 32 days.
Wow.
And it was getting progressively worse. It got to the point where December I had one that lasted 6 hours continuous. Ooh. And it was the breaking point. It was like, I have to do something. I don't care what it is. I was praying every day, and the more I prayed, the worse it got. And December was just a point where I said, okay, God, whatever you want to do, I'm open to it. I gotta have relief. I can't take it
So basically
anymore.
in December, you gave your will up.
I gave it up.
And said God's will.
I did. I had prayed for all those years. Every time it would happen, I'd pray, and then I'd forget about it until it happened again, and just believing, you know, God healing me. And then December, I said, you know what? I don't care how, because I was scared to death having a surgery. They told me the only way, the doctor said the only way that we could eliminate was to have surgery.
Wow. Wow.
So I called the surgeon and I said, let's go ahead and schedule an appointment. Took 2 months to get an appointment. I'm like, why are you waiting so long? I mean, I'm ready to do it. Let's get it done, because I've been waiting 5 years. And they finally called me at the end of January. I had another seizure in January. It was
Of this year?
Of this year. Mm-hmm. And it was particularly bad. And they called me a few days later and said, we got an appointment for you February 4th. But we have to do another MRI before we do the surgery, just so they can map my brain and figure out exactly which way to go. And I said, oh, this is it. This is where God's going to heal. Because I got to do, I had surgery scheduled. I was going to do a final MRI. And they're going to do the MRI and it's going to be gone. And then I got testimony.
Yes.
Because I was excited.
So you had already,
I figured it out.
You knew how God was going to fix it.
I knew exactly what God was going to do.
Gotcha.
And that's where my faith was, and that's what I believed. So I went and had the MRI, and we're walking down the hall. My wife, Kim, was with us, and she looked at the technician after we were done. We were going back to have the consultation, and she says, so what happens if the MRI comes back where the cyst is gone? And the technician looked at her and she said, oh, it's there and it's big. And it's like the wind was out of my sails then, because now my focus turned to the surgery and it was serious. Yeah. I didn't want to do it. I would have done anything God wanted me to not have to go through that surgery. Wow. And we went to a consultation and he started to tell me exactly what they were going to do. So as you can imagine, they were going to cut my skull open. And when he got to that point, I said, I don't want to know anything else. Don't even talk to me.
I was going to say, the less you know, the better. Just do what you got to do.
Just schedule it. You do what you got to do. And my whole prayer life shifted to just give me strength and peace, because I went through a depression for about 2 weeks.
And this was before the thing. So tell us about where the ultimate healing took place at. Let's go to the surgery, because he didn't fix you.
Miraculous.
He didn't just magically disappear.
No, it didn't disappear.
So what happened then, so we can find out whether that ultimate healing take place at?
So I went in on February 4th to have the surgery, and spent all day in waiting, because the OR was so busy. We just had to wait for an opening, and they gave me the medicine to kind of calm me down, because I was a basket case. I was crying like a baby.
Wow.
I mean, I'm a fairly old man. I was crying like a baby, and everybody's telling me, "Oh, it's gonna be okay," but they weren't the ones getting their head cut on. And they wheeled me down, and that's the last thing I remember is busting in the doors of the OR. And I sat up and I looked around and I said, this is where we're having a surgery? And he said, yeah, we're at the operating room. I said, this place is a wreck. Y'all need to clean it up. And then I was out. That's the last thing I remember.
Wow. And when you came to, what happened?
When I came to, I opened one eyeball, and I was in the ICU. Nobody was around. There was a woman that came, shut the curtain. I must have just got there. And I looked at that woman, and I said, hey. She said, what? And I said, God's with me. And she didn't say nothing, and she kept shutting the curtain. And I said, hey, I told you God's with me. And she said, yes, he's with you. He's been with you this whole time.
Wow.
And I don't know what happened when I was out. I have no idea. But I had prayed before I went there, and I said, God, if you're not with me, don't send me to the surgery. And the first thing I said when I came out was God was with me. So he had to have been there. He had to have been speaking to me. And maybe I saw him. Maybe I talked with him. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, there's another part to your story. We're going to wait till we come to that part. We're going to let Jen talk about our other guests and her testimony before we come back to you. You got a good
good ending. Yeah. So Kennedy, I know your story. A lot of people do, but some people don't. And Kennedy's story is really special because it's a long, drawn-out process of half of her life that was basically lost in a praying mama. So go ahead and let us know a little bit about that.
Yes, so when I was a kid, I was perfectly normal, perfectly healthy, and I got a strep infection, totally normal. We went to the doctor, test came back negative, so we left, no big deal. We just thought it was, we just thought I didn't have strep. And so a few days later, I went to bed one night and I woke up the next day a completely different little girl. Like it was night and day. I all of a sudden was having irrational fears. I was having these crazy tics, which are basically just involuntary movements. I was having vocal tics, physical tics. I was terrified of my teeth falling out, my shoes being too tight, just crazy things that were non-existent the day before.
Wow.
And so a few months went by, this only got worse. And so my parents were kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's wrong. They thought it was a phase. Turns out, after a few months, they're like, not a phase. We don't know what's up. And so they take me to several doctors, and every single one of the doctors were like, I have never seen anything like this before. I have absolutely no idea what's wrong with her. And they just kind of gave me a general diagnosis of OCD. And that was what we thought was that. And so a few months later, we went to the dentist. I had a cavity. And we walked in, and they called me back, and the dentist gets out the needle to numb me up to fill my tooth, and she sees that I'm starting to cry. I mean, I'm 8 years old, so at this point I had been sick for 2 years. And she's like, I'm sorry, but I can't fill your daughter's tooth. I'm sorry. And she just stops, and she's like, you have got to leave, and you've got to find another dentist. And so my mom, I know.
Wow.
And
Just
so
saying.
my mom was absolutely furious. I mean, I'm a dental hygiene student. I know that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That people just don't do that. And so my mom was absolutely furious. She left the dentist, and we scheduled a new appointment with another dentist. We walked in, and he asked us, he says, is there anything I need to know about your child before I fill her tooth? And my mom said, well, yeah, she does have OCD is what she's been diagnosed with. And he's like, OCD? And he just was completely taken aback by that. And he was like, well, I mean, how old is she? And my mom's like, she's 8. And he's like, have you ever heard of a disorder called PANDAS? And he explained to us that PANDAS stood for a pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep. And so that was like a bell just like going off, like, oh my goodness. And so this is really where we start to see God. I mean, God was with us the whole time, but this is where he's starting to really, really work. And so, floored, we go home after I get my tooth filled, and my mom researches PANDAS, and she finds it on the internet, and I match every single symptom perfectly. And so a few months later, again, no doctors really know what PANDAS is. It was very rare back in 2008. And so she was watching Good Morning America, and there was a doctor on the show who was talking about PANDAS. And it was live television, and so as soon as the show finished airing, she ran to Google and she researched his number, and a random number popped up, and she doesn't know if this is his number. She's just desperate at this point.
I was going to say, it was the desperation of a mom. And she's like, whatever, like, we're going to try anything we can.
This had been going on for 2 years at this point, and I had gotten so bad at this point that I was ticking 140 times an hour. And so you think about 24 hours in a day, it's insane how much I wasn't living. I had hallucinations. I got to the point where my mom had to hold me down, and because I would have these rages, I would break things. It was absolutely out of control. And so she, in desperation, Googled his number, called his number, and he actually answered the phone.
Wow.
And they talked on the phone for 2 hours, and he diagnosed me over the phone with PANDAS. And he agreed to treat me. And, it was definitely trial and error. Some medications made me worse, some made me better. And during this time that I was under his care, I had developed a fear of eating. And so with this, I had developed severe anorexia. And it had gotten to the point where it had gotten so bad with the PANDAS and the anorexia combined that we actually were living in Apex, and we had to pack up and move to Sanford. And because my mom's parents were here and all sorts of things. And so it had gotten so bad that you could see my bones peeking through my skin. My friends would ask me, like, why can't I see your spine through your shirt? Like, it had gotten terrible, terrible. And it had gotten to the point where my mom called UNC Chapel Hill. And they answered the phone, and she said, hey, my daughter has anorexia. I was 9 at this point, and, can you fill her in? And they said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have any room. But you can call us back in a few hours and we'll see what we can do. And so she hung up, she called her closest friends, and she asked them to pray. They didn't know what they were praying for, but she did ask them to pray. And a few hours later, they called her back, and they had told her that a spot had opened up suddenly. And so literally, like within the next few days, we rushed up to UNC. They did an EKG. They figured out that my heart was beating at a super abnormal rate, and that I was 1 pound away from being admitted, and to the point where I wouldn't even be able to leave. And so I was in the program. I wasn't admitted, thankfully. I went every Wednesday, and they slowly but surely I started to be healed from that anorexia, and they said that I was one of the fastest kids that had ever been, done with the program. And at this point, I was 11 or 12, and just as soon as I was healed from anorexia, I remember that's around the point where I can remember feeling healing, because the symptoms of my pandas were way down. Everything just slowly started to fall into place, and that's when God healed me when I was 12.
For 6 years.
6 years.
I mean, that's your childhood.
Yeah.
Until you're a teenager, pretty much,
Yeah.
I mean, those puzzle pieces, God placed every single one, and then your mama praying all
Right.
through it.
That's it.
It's insane.
And the thing about it is, with both testimonies here, it was a period of time before ultimate healing came. And I think that we look for healing to come spontaneously, and God can do that.
Yep.
But then sometimes it's a process before you get ultimate healing, like full relief.
And sometimes he uses other things and other people.
Yes.
It's like with him, he probably thought, like, I'm about to show these people who my God is, And then it's like the doctor is the one that healed him.
Yeah.
Speaking of doctor that healed you, tell us about that last bit of your story.
Well, I went back to a follow-up appointment. It was sometime the end of February. So I had surgery. It went great. I was out of the hospital in less than 48 hours. I was off pain pills in 3 days.
Wow.
I just took an ibuprofen twice a day for another week. And then I went back to work 2 weeks to the day, full driving, going up on roofs, doing everything that I normally did in 2 weeks. I went back to a follow-up appointment. It was the end of February. And when I was checking out, they took my stitches out, which was worst part by far. It was way worse than the surgery. So the woman at the desk said, she looked down and she was writing the, all the notes, and I was make sure my insurance and stuff was right. And she said, "You're a very fortunate man." And I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "No, you don't understand." She said, "The one who did your surgery, Dr. Fukushima, is world-renowned surgeon who actually developed the type of surgery that they did on your head, and he was the one who did it."
Wow.
They said his schedule is so full that they had to we had to wait until February 4th so that he could be there to do the surgery on you, because he normally travels the whole world and teaches other surgeons how to do it.
Wow.
And it was at that point, immediately I was thinking about all the nurses, all the doctors, them going through high school, and maybe they were like Kennedy, went through something that made them want to go into being a nurse or being a doctor or being an anesthesiologist. And then he put this team of people together, because when I went in that operating room, I saw 12 to 15 people in that room. And God put all those people in there and used all their circumstances and all their education and all the late nights of studying and doing testing and all that, so that they could be there at the right time, so that they could heal me. God healed me, but he did through them.
Yeah.
And 100%, I have not had any symptoms whatsoever, no seizures, no nerves firing along my body, no nauseousness, no headaches, no dizziness. All of that has been gone, 100%.
Total healing.
Total healing.
So we're sitting here with two people totally healed. You were 2 months ago in brain surgery, and 6 years of her life, and now she's this amazing singer, so blessed, So before we go today, that was about all the time we have. Before we go, if you have any healing testimony, please share with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and meet us back here next week. But before we go, we have one more story that we need to get to.
So again, I'm glad you guys tuned in today. And as you see that God is a great healer, because back in 2007, I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis. I was in the Bahamas and I got bitten by a bug. And when I got back home, I began to be paralyzed from the waist down. Well, being paralyzed from the waist down, I went to the hospital and they said, well, we don't know what's wrong with you. We got to send you out here. We got to send you to UNC Hospital because we don't know what's going on with you. And so they called all these doctors in because they couldn't figure out what was going on with me. A young, perfectly healthy young man cannot walk, just all of a sudden is paralyzed from the waist down. As days go by, they try to research and try to find out what in the world is going on with this young man. And so they called all around the world to find out what could be going on. They said they called a doctor, Wade in Germany, and said he has a rare case of a transverse myelitis. Only 10,000 people in the world gets this disease. And from that point on, I was like, Lord, what are you going to do? I'm mad at God at this point because I'm like, God, how can you allow this to happen to me and I never walk again with children and being able to live a full life? Stayed in the hospital and they began to treat me with antibiotics because of this rare disease. They try to figure out what can we do to get him back up and going. As I laid in the hospital at night after night after night, mad with God, just wouldn't even talk to him. I said, Lord, I'm going to be bougie against you because you just did not help me. You didn't deliver me. And the Lord will get you to the point where you can be mad at him, but sooner or later you'll come back to him. And so I said, okay, Lord, I know I can't do this without you because the doctors don't know what to do. They trying to call everybody else. Can you please help me? And I said, my prayer is this, Lord, I want to be able to walk out of this hospital. With that being said, didn't know if the Lord heard my prayer or not. I began to go through the motions of going through physical therapy. Every day my legs would get stronger, but they told me, they said, Daniel, we think that you're probably going to never walk again. You know, when you hear that word, sometimes that just hurts your heart. And you realize, maybe I never walk again. But I knew who I served. And I knew God, if God make you a promise, he'll deliver on his promise every time. And so as time went by and I stayed in the hospital almost 6 months trying to recover from this as they're preparing me to go home in the wheelchair and to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. There come a time where they found this device they put on my legs and it began to strengthen my legs exactly where it needed to be strengthened at. And before you know it, when it was time for me to go home, they didn't roll me out in the wheelchair. I was able to walk out that hospital only because God is a great healer. So maybe in your life right now, you're saying that you've been going through stuff and you've been going through like our guests here that been going through year after year after year and feel like God is not going to heal you. But sometimes healing comes with a process. But when God heals, he gives ultimate healing because that's just who he is. So let me tell you right now, don't wait another minute. If God has healed you of something, comment it, your testimony in this live right now. Just tell your testimony because the Bible says we overcome by our testimony. Tell somebody what God has done for you.
And don't forget to go to LifeSprings.online and fill out a prayer card. Tell us how we can pray for you and how we can celebrate with you if you've made any commitments to God or have any praise reports on healing as well. Don't forget to tune in next week, same time, same place. We'll see you then.
All
Bye,
right,
guys.
take it easy. Bye-bye.